recording, and then I'm gonna screen share.
Just one thing from me.
Yes,
I
Kelly.
have to be gone by 9 o'clock, so I know that this was scheduled until 9:30, and I think our team.
Yes, Kelly. Anne's aware of that you have to leave at 9. Yep, we are all good to go on that.
Yes.
Yeah, Robin Ficker here. Can you hear me?
Yes, but we cannot see you, Robin.
I know, because I cannot see you.
Are you going to be joining via webinar?
Well, I tried to, and for some reason it's not letting me. When I push join, nothing happens.
Okay, I have a few people on the attendees asking if we're starting, so I think we should probably get started. Can everyone see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay, Anne, is that okay if I start?
Yes.
Yeah, 1 second. Hey, Mary Beth. Christine just walked by and said, hi, can you shut the door? Okay, thank you.
Okay, are we ready to go? Okay.
Good morning. Welcome to this forum of candidates running in the Democratic and Republican Party primaries for Maryland governor, presented by Bethesda Beat and Bethesda Magazine. Thank you for joining us. This event is being recorded. The recording will be posted on BethesdaMagazine.com and sent to registrants. If you're watching this live via webinar, you will be able to choose your preferred language at the bottom of your screen. Transcripts will be processed automatically and available for download. I'm your moderator, Ann Talent, executive editor of Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat. We are part of ZPOP Media, the leading media company in Montgomery County. Bethesda Beat and Bethesda Magazine are award-winning publications covering news, issues, and lifestyle topics across Maryland's most populous county. To keep you up to speed ahead of the July 19th primary, we've launched a weekly politics newsletter with curated stories and election resources. You can sign up on our website, and we'll also be dropping a link in the chat. Today, we're delighted to hear from 9 candidates for the Democratic nomination for governor and the 4 candidates for the Republican nomination for governor. After the introductory questions will be posed to individual candidates. They will have 90 seconds to respond to each question. And fellow candidates, either I'll indicate whether of the same party or of both parties, have 1 minute for rebuttal if they wish. I have the discretion to award 30 seconds of final rebuttal to the candidate I posed the original question to. My colleague Jen Farkas will be signaling candidates with signs as their time winds down. At the end of the allotted time, the candidate will be permitted to finish their sentence, then we'll be moving on. We'll open by giving the candidates a chance to introduce themselves, while at the same time asking them to address our first question: what differentiates you from competitors for your party's nomination? They will have 90 seconds. We'll begin with the Republicans. The order is Dan Cox, Robin Ficker, Joseph Werner, and Kelly Schultz. Mr. Cox, 90 seconds.
Thank you and good morning. It's an honor to be here today with all of my distinguished friends, and I am honored to present the Campaign for Freedom. I am a state delegate running for governor, asking for your support and vote because I'm the candidate who will give you your freedom back and end the mandates on day one. We are going to make sure that the jabs for jobs is never again done in our state. We're going to make sure there's no vaccine passport that says that you have to produce your medical private information to government agents or otherwise in order to obtain services and benefits. That's the law of the land. It's called civil rights, and we're going to reinforce that here in Maryland. We're going to also give our schools back to parents. We're going to make sure that choice is there for every parent. We're going to ban the competition of those born as males who are competing against our girls in our classes, in our high school sports. That's wrong. We need to give our sports back to our girls. We need to give our property back in tax relief. Right now, billions of dollars from the Trump tax cuts are sitting in the Treasury, not returned. I'm honored to be endorsed by President Trump, and I'm going to return that money to the people and lower our property tax rates, and we're going to give our streets back. Once again, have a safe Maryland where we're not going to have this catch and release program that's going on right now with cartels running the show with over 1,400 fentanyl deaths and every day in Baltimore an issue. And so I'm honored. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm asking for your vote.
Thank you. Mr. Ficker.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Robin Ficker, a lifelong resident of Montgomery County. This is a very important election for Montgomery County. Over the years, Montgomery County has received back about 25 cents for every dollar it sends to Annapolis. This election, for the very first time, Montgomery County will have a chance to elect a Montgomery County resident to be governor. That way, we can assure that Montgomery County will, from now on, be getting at least its fair share of state tax dollars. Montgomery County voters do not want to elect an absentee landlord. We have fine candidates from Montgomery County running for governor. We must elect one in this election if Montgomery County is to get its fair share. I'm the only candidate running who wants to cut taxes, cut the state sales tax by 2 cents, $780 per year, every year for each household. That will give every family a fiscal stimulus and will give us incentive to bring in jobs with our job strike force from the big companies, all of which have shunned Maryland under Secretary Schultz, like Raytheon, which just yesterday decided to move from Massachusetts to Northern Virginia.
Okay, that's time. Thank you. Mr. Werner, 90 seconds. I'm sorry, Mr. Werner, you're muted.
Hello, hear me now? Again, thank you for having me here. I appreciate this. I am Joseph Warner. I'm running for governor, and here's the reason why. I'm a fifth-generation Marylander. I'm not a career politician. Yes, I'm an attorney, and I worked in Washington, D.C. My family, my great-grandfather was from Harford County. I believe in representing you, the people. I want to help with, one, getting these crazy crime under control. I want to stop repeat offenders from being on the street. I'm going to get illegal guns off the street. What I'm going to do is get drugs off the street and fentanyl. Fentanyl should be declared a toxic substance or a hazardous material, and it should be a bigger crime than fentanyl. I would divert drug users into local programs and to the healthcare system. I would do civil commitments, and I would use the mental health system to get a lot of the people off the street that are mentally ill. I have been involved with school choice since 1994. I drew up the first charter school bill in Washington, D.C. I've worked in the special education area, and I know how important education is, and I've been working it consistently since 1994, so my position hasn't changed. The mask would be off of these children. There wouldn't be any kind of requirements to get the vaccine, especially for anyone under the age of 18. So I would not be that. I have a small business. My wife has a small business. I understand what shutdowns and lockdowns did to us and to our customers. I understand how even seniors wanted to be out, and how it disrupted their life and caused.
Thank you,
so
Mr.
much
Werner. Ms.
thank you.
Schultz.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kelly Schultz, and I'm running for governor, and I am so excited to be here today to talk to the Bethesda beat. I will say that my campaign is a campaign about opportunity. And I think it has really proven for us over the course of the past year plus that we've been running, the type of excitement that we get from people all over the state, because we talk about the things that really care to all Marylanders. We care about safe. We care about safe communities. We care about a steady educational system, and we care about prosperity. And we want to be able to make sure that everybody in Maryland is able to achieve safe, steady, and prosperous. I was a mom, and I was 19 years old, and I dropped out of college I was pregnant, and I was gonna have my family. I got married, and I raised my 2 boys. And for the next 15 years of my life, I did everything that I could in order to be able to make our family whole. I waited tables, I tended bar, and I raised my children. I raised my children in public schools just like I was raised in public schools, and I know the importance of that. So I never thought that today I would be able to be here talking to anybody about running for governor. But because I was that young mom, because I started my own business, because I was a member of Governor Hogan's cabinet for Department of Secretary and the Department of Commerce, I would say that I'm uniquely qualified to be your next governor. And I'm really looking forward to that opportunity in the conversation.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz, is my understanding you'll be exiting early today from the forum?
Correct. I have to leave at 9 o'clock for a previous engagement.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go to the Democrats. Again, the order here is to introduce yourselves and to address the question, what differentiates you from competitors for your party's nomination? There'll be 90 seconds. The order is for Sharon Baker, Tom Perez, Ralph Jaffe, Doug Gansler, John Barron, Jerome Siegel, Ashwani Jain, John King, and Wes Moore. Peter Francho will not be appearing. Mr. Baker, 90 seconds. I'm sorry, is Mr. Baker muted? All right.
And it looks like he dropped off. I'm not sure if he's having a technical issue, but he must have dropped off. So I think we should move to the next one.
Okay. All right then, Mr. Perez, 90 seconds.
Thank you and good morning. I'm Tom Perez, and along with my running mate Shannon Sneed, we're running for governor and lieutenant governor to bring jobs, justice, and opportunity to all Marylanders. I'm a proud Montgomery County resident. I'm a proud MCPS parent. My kids went through the MCPS system and we were very satisfied customers. We're from the GSD wing of the Democratic Party. We want to get stuff done, meaningful stuff that really makes a difference. I've spent my entire career in public service. As a federal civil rights prosecutor, I prosecuted police misconduct and racial violence cases. As the first Latino elected to the Montgomery County Council, I fought for world-class schools and bringing down prescription drug costs. As Maryland's labor secretary, I implemented the nation's first statewide living wage law. And as President Obama's head of civil rights, we tackled police reform. We took on predatory lenders and we protected reproductive health rights. And as your labor secretary, I settled major strikes and I worked to make sure that businesses and workers could thrive. Everywhere I've served, we've gotten stuff done. I'm a dreamer and a doer. And I really believe that the best way to figure out what someone's going to do in the future is to look at what they've done in the past. And I invite you to do that. The Washington Post did that. And that's why they endorsed our campaign, saying that none of the other campaigns can match my track record and command of governing. And I'm honored to have that support, honored to have the support of so many union members, honored to have the support of Ike Leggett and so many others in Montgomery County. And I look forward to the questions here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Jaffe.
Thank you. Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? All right.
Yes.
Thank you, Bethesda, for giving me the opportunity to be here with you all. I respect all of my competitors running for governor. However, I'm much different than all of them. I want to get rid of all career politicians. They are screwing us up, pardon my language. I encourage all of you, the people listening and watching, check my website, fedupwithcrookedpolitics.com. It speaks for where I come from. To prove I want to get rid of all of the career politicians because all they care about is money, fame, and power. Ralph Jaffe cares about being a good public servant. I do not also, by the way, accept campaign contributions because in my book, they are disguised bribes. So I don't take any money from anybody. And I'm very proud of the fact that this movement I started back in 1992, which is roughly about 30 years old, has accomplished a lot. And again, check my website, fedupwithcrookedpolitics.com. So if you're fed up with the phony career politicians, the choice is yours. Vote for Ralph Jaffe and what I stand for. I don't take campaign contributions because they're bribes. I tell the truth all the time. And any money, my salary, which I will give to the poor and needy. I challenge all of my competitors to do the same thing. Take all that campaign bribe money and give it to the poor and needy. That's what we need to do. That's what the Jaffe campaign is all about.
Thank you. Mr. Gansler.
Thank you. 50 years ago, my alarm clock would go off at 5:30 a.m. when I lived at 7210 Maple Avenue in Chevy Chase. I did my paper route. One of the buildings on my route was the Air Rights building. I'd come home. I went to walk to Chevy Chase Elementary. After school, I'd go to Lowens and Giffords. At night, I'd go to BCC Barons basketball games. I later raised my children in Bethesda. I still remember fondly the Bethesda yesterday, but I embrace the Bethesda of today. The Hot Shops is now a skyscraper. I still go to Bradley Barber's and Stroh Snyder's. And I say all this because that little boy that grew up here in the BCC area will be to me when I'm governor. We've never had a governor from Montgomery County, and we certainly never had a governor from Bethesda or Chevy Chase. And I think that's really important. My 5 major opponents are from either Massachusetts, New York, or elsewhere. We have been taken advantage of by the state, and Montgomery County needs to have a voice at the table. I spent 23 years in government. I was an assistant United States attorney, prosecuting homicides and all types of crimes. I was your state's attorney during the Beltway snipers and other cases like that. And I was your attorney general. And so I look forward to being your governor going forward. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank Scott and Joe Copeland for having Bethesda be and making this possible for folks in Bethesda and Chevy Chase to have a voice.
Thank you. Mr. Barron.
Thank you. I'm John Barron. I'm also a native of Bethesda. I've lived here 28 years. I'm a former nonprofit executive. Before that, I was a Clinton administration official. I've gotten major federal legislation enacted into law. The reason I'm running for governor is that Maryland is not making progress on major problems damaging millions of lives, and I'm offering a fundamentally different approach. In education, more than a quarter of middle school students in our state can't read at a basic level. Those numbers are no different than 20 years ago. Moderate income Marylanders have seen flat wages since the 1980s, while income inequality has soared, and we've made no progress reducing our poverty rate in more than 30 years. Fellow Marylanders, we can't just keep doing the same thing we've been doing for decades, rolling out one unproven government program after another and expect a different result, because unfortunately, many programs just don't work. Instead, to make progress, we need to expand solutions that don't just sound good, but have actually been tested in the real world and shown to make a big difference in people's lives. I'll give you one concrete example. When I'm governor, we will provide high quality tutoring to every struggling first and second grader in the entire state, because that has been shown to move them up toward grade level early before the problems get serious in later grades. We're going to do this by engaging the community, including retirees and recent college graduates, to become tutors for a modest stipend as a public service. That's just one concrete example. I look forward to discussing others.
Thank you. Mr. Siegel. Mr. Siegel, are you muted?
Yeah, can we start over, please? I can't seem to get onto the screen.
We can hear you and see you. Please begin.
Okay, please start my clock over. Yes, I'm a philosopher who spent his life on public policy. I worked for the House Budget Committee, 10 years in the executive branch and 25 years at University of Maryland School of Public Policy. I'm running as a bread and roses socialist. It's a new kind of socialism. It doesn't seek to overthrow capitalism, but basically to make it a sector within our life, akin, let's say, to the nonprofit sector. But what makes socialism really different and makes my campaign different is that I am talking from outside the system. I'm talking about going to a new system. And the defining element of the system is actually the social contract. And what animates socialism is from each according to their ability to each according to their need, which is basically the principle of a family. Whereas what we're in this society is market capitalism, where what you get from the cornucopia is what the market can deliver. So essentially what you do is you bring your labor to the market, you sell it, you get an income, and you go out and you buy what you can. And the differentials that there are in terms of what you can sell your labor for ultimately determine all the differentials in the kind of life that you have. Bread and roses socialism actually is only one quarter, let's say, Bernie Sanders. It's a quarter Thoreau, the recognition that the great thing in life is to make life poetic. It's a quarter of the Quakers who believed in the joy of simplicity. And it's one quarter of the early Marx, who had this distributive formula and was concerned about alienated labor, alienated in the sense of labor that you sell on the market.
Sorry, Mr. Jane.
Thank you so much for having me and for inviting all the candidates. My name is Ashwani Jain and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a 32-year-old cancer survivor, a son of immigrants and small business owners, and a product of Maryland, specifically Montgomery County Public Schools. I've worked in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, the Obama White House, and 2 federal agencies. I am running for governor to make politics inclusive and accessible. And while I would be the nation's youngest governor, unlike others, I am fully accessible because I'm the only governor candidate to spend 90% of my time meeting voters at their homes in a different county every day. I'm fully accountable because 100% of our campaign is run by residents from every age, background, and county. And I'm fully transparent because we have shared the most detailed and paid for policy agenda since last January of 2021. We've already created one of the largest grassroots campaigns in this state, and we've done it without hosting a single fundraiser or without taking a penny from developers, businesses, PACs, or polluters. You can go to janeforgovernor.com to learn more, and I look forward to the questions today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. King.
Good morning. My name is John King. I'm grateful to the Bethesda Beat for this forum. It took my family 3 generations to travel 25 miles from enslaved in a cabin in Gaithersburg to serving in the cabinet of the first Black president. I'm here today because my ancestors lived with faith in a future they could not see. As a teacher, principal, professor at College Park, and United States Secretary of Education for President Obama, I've dedicated my life to public service. I'm running for governor because I have faith that in the wealthiest state, in the wealthiest country that has ever existed in the world, we can build a more just and prosperous future together. You're going to hear real differences this morning between me and the other candidates because so many here are trapped in an era where the measure of success was years as an insider or Annapolis endorsements. I believe success is truly funding world-class schools and universal affordable childcare by making those who make over $1 million and large corporations pay their fair share. I believe success is ensuring a supply of housing we can afford and an approach to transportation that's centered on people, not cars. I believe success is taking bold action on the climate emergency and achieving net zero by 2035. And I believe success is rejecting the dog whistle politics of the past, achieving public safety, and ending Maryland's shame as the national leader in incarcerating young Black men. Government should be a force for good in people's lives.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Thank you so much, and good morning. And it's great to be with you. I'm a 3rd generation Marylander, and while I'm a Baltimorean, I was born in Montgomery County. So it's great to be with you all now. And I'm running for governor because opportunity is readily available for some. It's just dangerously absent for others. And right now in Maryland, we have families that are concerned with rising costs and feeling unsafe in their own communities and in their own skin. And when we think about what we have right here in our state, that we have some of the best hospitals in the world, and we have people who live down the street from those hospitals who cannot afford basic care, that we have world-class technology companies and communities that don't have access to broadband, that we have some of the most incredible schools in the state. And also just last week, we had students who had to be let out early because it was too hot outside. So as a state, we are asset rich, but we are strategy poor. And I've led in every sector of our society, whether it was in the military leading soldiers in Afghanistan as a captain with the 82nd Airborne Division, or whether it was as a small business owner here in Maryland, helping first generation students, or whether it was CEO of one of the largest poverty fighting organizations in this country. And between my running mate, former Delegate Aruna Miller, who represented District 15 in Montgomery County, We're proud of the fact that our experience and our ticket has led in the executive, the legislative branch, the nonprofit sector, the private sector, and in the military. That we have the experience to meet the needs that families are facing right now. And we'll be ready to lead on day one, because when I was in the military, we led by a simple principle: leave nobody
Thank you,
behind.
Mr. Moore.
Thank you.
It appears Mr. Baker has dropped off. We'll now begin the individually formulated questions. As a reminder, I'll ask the question of one candidate who has 90 seconds for their answer. Rebuttals will be open either to candidates of the same party or both parties, I'll specify. And if the original candidate, and those rebuttals are 1 minute, if the original candidate wants to do a final rebuttal, they'll have 30 seconds. This question is for Ms. Schultz. The January 6th committee hearings will begin tomorrow. Do you consider the storming of the Capitol on January 6th, 2021 to be sedition? To what degree do you hold former President Trump responsible for the insurrection? And should officials who refuse to appear before the January 6th committee be held in contempt? You have 90 seconds.
Right, there's a lot of questions there. And so this is what I will say. January 6th was an insurrection on our Capitol, and I feel very strongly to be able to protect the law enforcement officers that were there, many of whom I have spoken to in depth about their roles there on that day. And it is a blight on America for what we have been able to see and hear and experience on January 6th. But we've moved beyond that. I think what we have to do is we have to talk about how to rebuild our nation and how to rebuild our party, specifically the Republican Party, to be able to make sure that we are in a representation mode to represent all Marylanders, and in the case of the nation, all members of the United States of America. You know, when I was in the House of Delegates, I had bipartisan support. We were able to get really strong things done to be able to protect victims of crime, to be able to reduce taxes, to be able to make sure that Marylanders had what they needed in order for them to survive without a lot of government interference. And when I was at the Department of Labor with Governor Hogan and the Department of Commerce with Governor Hogan, we did amazing things across the aisle to be able to make sure that we were able to get good things done. Reducing regulation, we became the most business-friendly and the most improved business-friendly state in the nation. And that is what I will continue under the support of everyone that we're able to work with. And I look forward to the opportunity to continue that conversation.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. Now, fellow Republican candidates may seek your 1 minute for rebuttal time. Please put your Zoom hand up if you wish to rebut. Mr. Werner, 1 minute.
Well, you know, it's like we may be the most improved business-friendly state, but we're certainly not business-friendly. And we certainly have a long way to go to make us business-friendly. And as far as
the question was about January 6th.
Yeah, and as far as the Capitol, I think it was a sad day. It was disgusting. It made the Republicans look bad. Also, it was just a riot. It wasn't an insurrection. It wasn't ever going to topple the government. It was a group of foolish people who should be punished, but it made everyone in America look bad. And I would punish everyone who was there who participated, but I wouldn't call it such a giant insurrection. But people had put bombs in the Capitol in the past. That's an insurrection. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Ficker, 1 minute. You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Ms. Schultz says she does things in a bipartisan way. You cannot be bipartisan in your vote for president. I would like to ask her why she refused to vote for the Republican nominee for president in the general election in both 2020 and 2016. Furthermore, she says that she has made Maryland job friendly. It's true, however, that Amazon, Apple, Boeing, Facebook, Global Industries, Google, Intel, Microsoft, Nucor Steel, Samsung, Hyundai, Taiwan Semiconductor, Texas Instruments, and Toyota all built multi-billion-dollar improvements in other states and shunned her and her sleepy, inadequate Department of Commerce.
Thank you, Mr. Ficker. Any other rebuttals from Republicans before we return to Ms. Schultz. All right, Ms. Schultz, 30 seconds.
Great. First of all, I will say that we do have a great record and we're the most approved state in the nation for business. And it doesn't mean that we're the best state in business, but we have the policies and we have the direction in order to be able to get there. And we're going to need the legislators' help to be able to make sure that we can continue to move forward with those processes. But going back to the original question, we want to be able to make sure that we are safe, our Constitution is safe. We do not want to continue to call our vice presidents traitors. We want to be able to make sure that we are all in this together and that we are one Maryland and one America.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz alluded to something that Mr. Cox said in referring to Mike Pence as a traitor. Mr. Cox, would you like 1 minute for rebuttal?
Well, sure. Thank you. I'd like to hear if Ms. Schultz would say the same about her Democratic opponents on this stage that have called the president 45 a traitor. Free speech is a sacred thing in America. And when we have issues before us that need to be examined, I think we need to focus on those. People are concerned and fed up with politicians trying to smear one another. We need to get back to unifying our state. We need to get back to making sure that we actually do our business and answer the phones when you shut down businesses. Non-essential businesses were invented by my opponent, Ms. Schultz, and she shut down 50% of the economy in Maryland, shut down our churches and houses of faith for the first time in 400 years, but she left abortion clinics open in Maryland. I'm going to do something much better. I'm going to make sure that we never again take away our freedoms. We're going to return the freedom and the power back to the people.
Thank you. Moving on. This question is for Mr. Moore. Mr. Moore, during previous debates, much of the discussion about crime has centered on Baltimore, yet violent crime has been increasing in jurisdictions throughout the state. Montgomery County had more homicides last year than any year in at least the past 3 decades. Many of the approaches that have been floated during the campaign have been medium and long-term. As governor, what immediate steps would you take to stop the killing of our fellow Marylanders? 90 seconds.
Thank you. And yes, I mean, this is an issue that while we're watching, the emergency and the crisis of it in Baltimore, where literally just in this past months, I've had to speak at the vigil of a custodian, a 69-year-old grandmother who was working in my church, who was killed in the basement, in the bathroom of my church in East Baltimore. You are right that this is impacting everybody, and I actually think that when we think about the things that we have to be able to do right now across the state, whether because we're having close to 600 homicides across the state of Maryland, we're watching significant increases. It does mean things like tackling illegal guns that are flooding our streets. That I'm supportive and I'm thankful that the legislature took the leadership to eliminate ghost guns off our streets, but we still have a challenge of illegal guns that we have to be able to that we've got to be able to focus on. That we have to do things like fixing parole and probation. When you consider the fact that 1/3 of all people who are doing these violent crimes are in some way, shape, or form in violation of parole and probation. That we have to expand grants for community violence intervention programs. Much of the violence that we're seeing is retaliatory in nature, and these community violence intervention programs actually work. But the problem is, the challenges for so many of them, they are underfunded or completely unfunded by the state. And we also have to invest in things like reentry services, so we can get rid of the challenge of this revolving door of violence that we continue to see within our society. If people do not have opportunities, they will have a challenge of being able to reintegrate.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Now, your fellow Democrats may seek 1 minute for rebuttal time. Please put your Zoom hand up if you wish to rebut. I think Mr. Jane, start with you, 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's no one reason for crime and there's no one solution. And I think the reason why we keep having these issues is because we fail to tackle the entire system comprehensively. That's how we increase safety, by ending extreme sentences for children, ending the money bail system, continuing the end of for-profit prison contracts, decriminalizing scheduled drugs, and instead investing in more local and fully funded rehab centers to actually get to the root causes of these issues, investing in more mental health professionals, replacing SROs in our public schools with guidance counselors and social workers, preparing those who are in prison for life outside of prison, having independent oversight. Yes, supporting red flag laws. Yes, making sure that we ban ghost guns, which the legislature approved, which is great. But we also have to make sure that people have access to good jobs and a reduced cost of living. That's how we stop putting Band-Aids on these issues and build community trust in the long term as well.
Thank you. Mr. Perez, 1 minute.
Thank you so much. I was a former federal prosecutor, and when we had spikes in crime, one of the most important things we did was partnership at scale, making sure that the federal, state, local authorities came together along with communities to get a handle on things. I was a federal prosecutor in the mid-90s when we had a church arson epidemic across the country. We did exactly what I just described. What did we accomplish? We tripled the solve rate. We passed critical legislation. We got resources on the ground. That's what we would do here. We need partnership at scale at a state level. We need the governor to be a meaningful partner with Baltimore, with Montgomery County, Prince George's County, everywhere. And then we also need to make sure we're investing in a community mental health infrastructure. I was involved in a number of cases involving communities where we had spikes in people in mental health crisis interacting with police. And so we need to equip the police with what we call assertive community treatment teams. These are specially trained folks that can de-escalate. I agree with what other folks said. Wes had some very good points, and we want to augment this so that we can have that partnership at scale. That's how we do this.
Thank you. Mr. Barron.
Thank you. So, we all share similar goals. We all want to improve public safety, but the other candidates and the other Democrats, their approach to achieving those goals misses a fundamental point, which is that many government programs, no matter how well-meaning, that are designed to address those goals, they don't work. So when my opponents propose to roll out one unproven program after another in areas like reentry and mental health and all of that, those are well-meaning, but it's just not going to bring progress. We've done that. We've been doing that for decades. I mean, what I'm offering are tested and proven solutions. In the area of public safety, there's an approach called focused deterrence, which targets repeat violent offenders, offering them positive opportunities like job opportunities and so on, but also making clear that if they continue acting violently, it will result in extraordinary attention from law enforcement. In other cities, it's reduced the homicide rate by 50%.
Thank you. Mr. Gansler.
Thank you. Yes, in many ways, this election is precisely about crime and criminal justice. That is bringing down crime and lifting justice up. There is nobody else running from either party that has any background whatsoever in criminal justice or as a prosecutor being part of the criminal justice system. I was an assistant United States attorney under Eric Holder for 6 years, mostly homicide, but prosecuted every type of crime. I was your state's attorney for 8 years, prosecuting the snipers, Robert Lucas when he killed Monsignor Wells, Terrence Green when he shot Officer Kyle Ollinger. I started the first drug courts in Maryland's history, the first domestic violence courts in Maryland's history. We started the Family Justice Center in Rockville. As 22 years of working on these issues and including criminal justice reform. So there's no other candidate that has that background. And think about that, because this is a major issue. We're going to put 1,000 police officers on the street. They're going to be trained in de-escalation. We're going to go after gun crimes, putting convicted felons that use guns to commit crimes into the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Thank you. Mr. Jaffe.
The only candidate who has called for the National Guard to come out as an option, because the truth is, I'm the only one who has the guts to tell you there are just not enough police officers in Baltimore City to do the job. People are getting shut up every day because we don't have proper numbers of police officers. I also want to talk about my tutor-renter program. The long-term solution is better education. My tutor-mentor program, checking it out on Facebook, is designed to keep kids in school instead of dropping out. That's what we need to do. We have to tell the people the truth for once in a, for now. But these politicians, they don't tell you the truth. Jaffe tells you the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Siegel. You're muted.
Can we keep that off? I'm going to break with protocol and direct my rebuttal to Kelly Schultz's remark because the question was so fundamental and the rebuttal of her Republicans was so lame. She ducked the Donald Trump part of your question. Donald Trump is really the issue and the issue behind January 6th. What Trump did in his denial that he lost the election, basically, is he took a wrecking ball to American democracy. We never had a president in our entire history who denied the legitimacy of our elections. And as a result of Trump, what we have now is 60 to 70 million people in this country who believe that Joe Biden isn't the lawfully elected president of the United States. That belief is actually the basis for civil war. There's no basis for obeying the government if it's not democratically elected. The only way to be a self-respecting Republican at this time in American history is Lynn Cheney's way, which is to denounce Trump as basically an enemy of democracy and an enemy of America of the sort that we've never had before. Other than that, get out of that party. That party's got no basis for being part of American democracy.
Thank you.
Unless it
Mr.
rallies.
King.
Thanks. As a teacher and principal, I lost students to gun violence and had the experience of sitting in a living room with a mom who just lost a son to gun violence. So I understand deeply the urgency of this issue. Unfortunately, too often what we hear is tired talking points that are 30 years old and racist dog whistles about criminal justice. The fact is those things are not keeping us safe. We need an approach to public safety that understands that policing alone is not enough. It's necessary but not sufficient to address crime and violence. We need policing plus violence intervention programs, policing plus mental health services and addiction treatment, policing plus rec centers and summer jobs for our teens and apprenticeship programs, policing plus reentry strategies like the Second Chance Pell program that I launched when I was Secretary of Education for President Obama to help folks who are incarcerated get access to education. And policing plus strong gun laws and strong gun law enforcement. We need a holistic approach.
The rebuttals for this had been open just to Democrats, but I see every Republican has their hand up. So we'll do Republican rebuttals as well. We'll start with Ms. Schultz, 1 minute.
Great, thank you so much. And I would say that the rise in the crime across the state, and particularly in certain urban areas, is because of the lack of consequences. People are not afraid of the consequences, whether you go into a certain specific dime store and pick up and shoplift, or you commit murder on the street. And we need to get our prosecutorial system and our judicial system to be able to make sure that we're working hard to keep repeat violent criminals in jail, as opposed to looking for ways to get them out of jail. But I'll also say with the educational system, if we cannot educate our students in a way where they have and they have all of the support from every single one of us in those, especially those majority minority districts, we are failing them, and they then have no opportunity to be able to move forward. Our campaign is about education, to be able to make sure that they get what they are constitutionally deserved as the world-class education in the state. And we need to be able to make sure that we treat criminals like criminals and the police officers like the heroes that they are.
Thank you. Mr. Cox.
Thank you. Well, my opponent on the Republican side actually has presided over and in support of the Justice Reinvestment Act, as have my Democratic colleagues, which has allowed for dangerous criminals to be released back on our streets. The spike in crime since that act has passed has been astronomical, and the response has been tepid from the government leaders, particularly when we hear Mr. Gansler talking about his role as prosecutorial oversight in Maryland, and yet at the same time, during his tenures, the increase in murders and crime has skyrocketed. We have a need for an immediate taking of action and a different approach. And that has to be that we come in and make sure that our Baltimore City police officers are supported. They are down 500 to 800 officers. I'm the gentleman who sits in the Judiciary Committee handling this information. I fought against the Juvenile Reform Act provisions that would allow for carjacking individuals to go back on the streets and avoid crimes. We need to get a handle of this immediately, and I intend to do so.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Mr. Ficker, 1 minute.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, I think this question shows the need to have a Montgomery County resident as governor, because historically, Montgomery County has not gotten its fair share of state police aid. It's gotten far less than its fair share. As governor, I will make sure that Montgomery County has someone standing up for it in Annapolis and not looking at Montgomery County as an ATM, which these candidates from other jurisdictions inevitably do. Montgomery County is not your ATM, candidates from the rest of the state. And furthermore, if Ms. Schultz's agency was able to attract intel to Maryland, which is building $20 billion projects in both Arizona and Ohio, we would have thousands of well-paying jobs in the Baltimore or some other area where people
Thank
could
you,
then earn
Mr.
sufficient
Ficker.
salary.
Mr. Gansler, 30 seconds.
Thank you. I don't know where Mr. Cox is getting his facts, but when I was the head law enforcement officer of Montgomery County, the most diverse county in Maryland with over 1 million people, we had 13 murders a year. The only year that we actually transcended 20 murders during those 8 years was during the Beltway snipers. And I led the Joint Sniper Task Force, 1,400 law enforcement officers, federal, state, and local, to bring them to justice in 22 days. I argued in front of the United States Supreme Court, won a unanimous decision, 9-0 against a sex offender. So rhetoric is not a record is a record, and I have a great record of keeping crime down and lifting justice up.
Thank you. Mr. Perez, 30 seconds.
Yes, I wanted to respond to my good friend, John Barron, who said that we do things that don't work. And I want to tell you about something we did in Montgomery County when I was on the county council that worked. We put a one-stop workforce center in the Montgomery County Jail because we knew that the vast majority of folks were going to come out. And you know what? It worked. And it worked so well that when I became U.S. Labor Secretary, we took that model, a tried, true, and tested model, and we took it to scale. And that was a wonderful way to help reduce crime and to make sure people had opportunity. So that's why I'm the GSD wing of the Democratic Party. We got stuff done in this context.
Thank you. We're going to move on. Mr. Moore, you had the option of 30 seconds. Since this question was originally posed to you, did you have anything else to add?
No, just simply that what we are seeing in so many of our communities that we live and work in is not just simply a lack of consequence. It's a lack of opportunity. You know, and I think it's important to know that, do we need to make sure that we have violent offenders off of our streets? Absolutely. And everyone in our communities know that and feel that. But I also know that, as my mother used to tell me, that if someone doesn't care about their own future, they don't care about yours either. We've got to create and increase opportunities for people as well.
Thank you. We have to move on. This next question is for Mr. Cox. A shooting last month in Uvalde, Texas, killed 19 elementary school pupils and 2 teachers. The weapon was an AR-15. The week prior, 10 people were killed in a mass shooting at a Tops supermarket in Buffalo. This week, U.S. senators of both parties are discussing measures such as mental health funding, background checks, school safety measures, and red flag laws. Do you think that those measures would comport with the Second Amendment, and would you support them? What do you think should be done to stem gun violence in the United States? 90 seconds.
No, I do not support them because they do nothing to end the violence that's happening every day on our streets. Guns do not kill people, guns save lives. The proof of that is that the way that the horrific and breaking my heart, horrific, everyone knows how our hearts were broken for this school shooting in Texas. Oh my goodness. And the thing that changed the dynamic and saved kids' lives were those 2 brave Border Patrol agents who busted into that school with their guns. One of them grabbed a shotgun from his barber shop where he was obtaining a haircut and rushed to save his own child and every other child in that school. And in fact, lives were saved by those 2 officers who were very, very brave. That's the kind of heroism we need in our state. And the way to get back to safe streets is to start doing what the Democrats, unfortunately, on this panel, none of them will do. And that is to make anyone who commits a gun crime, raise that to a felony. In the Judiciary Committee where I sit, That bill, the Republican measure, has been defeated over and over again. And we need to make sure that we hold criminals accountable. We put them away when they use a gun in a violent crime. And I intend to do that as your governor.
Thank you, Mr. Cox. Now, fellow Republicans may seek your 1 minute for rebuttal time. Please put your hand up. Ms. Schultz, I see your hand up.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, when we talked about no consequences, this is what we're talking about with very specific state prosecutors across the state. In order for people to know that it's wrong to commit crimes, especially in our schools, and God bless those around our country that have been suffering at the deepest levels. We will continue to support them, but we need to have consequences. Governor Hogan put in very strict crime legislation to be able to attend to and make sure that we had those repeat violent offenders and those illegal gun users off the streets. And instead of spending more time trying to get people out of jail, we need to try to continue to look at ways in order to keep people in jail. And while we're at it, I visited Montgomery County last week, and we talked a lot about the SROs. Shame on Montgomery County for taking their SROs out of the schools. We had enabling legislation many years ago in order to be able to make sure that the counties had the ability to have somebody on hand to keep our children safe. We as parents need to know that somebody is in those schools keeping our children safe, and we will make sure that that happens.
Mr. Werner.
School resource officers do work. We need them in the schools. We need to harden the schools. Gun laws by themselves do nothing. You could see in Harford County, there was a man who was a felon. He was carrying an illegal handgun. He got stopped by the state police. He was charged with carrying an illegal handgun. He got 6 months extra probation. He was already on probation. A few months after that, he murdered 3 people. People murder people with knives. People murder people like the Oklahoma City bomber with fertilizer. People in Wisconsin used a car. Just going after the gun isn't the way to go. You've got to harden the target, have people with weapons that can defend you. Like we did in Maryland. We had a school resource officer in Baltimore County, I think it was in PG County, to stop the school shooter. So it's a tragedy. And people exploit it to just say, well, we're going to further our political agenda of more gun laws. I mean, it's tragic what happened, but more gun laws aren't going to do it. We have to, and some of those, the shooter in Florida. He was visited 21 times by the police and he was on the FBI radar. You should use civil enforcement, and they should say he's a danger to himself or others, and he should be involuntarily committed. So that's what I would do here in the state of Maryland.
Thank you. Mr. Ficker. You're muted.
I think Montgomery County has the best police force in the United States. They're well-trained. They're intelligent, they work hard. We've had more deaths from fentanyl than we have from gunshots. And I would strive to keep that deadly drug, which is being sold by street corner pharmacists, out of Maryland. We really need to focus on that, and we need to fund our police drug labs. I agree somewhat with Mr. Moore, who says we need to provide opportunities. Google is spending $9.5 billion in capital improvements in the United States this year, not $1 in Maryland. And Ms. Schultz's Department of Commerce has done nothing to attract Google, one of whose founders graduated from the University of Maryland. We need to provide JOBS. Nucor Steel just decided to make the largest private investment in West Virginia history.
Thank you, Mr. Ficker.
Why not?
That's time. I do see some Democratic hands up. We are going to move on to the next topic. This question is for Mr. Perez. The Hogan administration has been advancing plans to widen.
Sorry. Do I have a 30-second since that was my question?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead. 30 seconds.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to follow up and say that along with my colleagues, we need to take immediate action, as I was mentioning, to end this daily violence. And one of the ways we need to do that in protecting our children is the SRO program. We did that in Frederick County. We hardened our schools. My platform is calling for a level 3 security or above. It is a travesty that we can put $2 billion into a program in our budget, in our $62 billion budget, to help fund undocumented aliens being released into our society right now without vetting, and who are sometimes MS-13 like we caught in Frederick.
Thank you.
And we can get back to making sure our schools are safe by putting that money instead to harden our schools and to make sure our SROs.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
This question is for Mr. Perez. The Hogan administration has been advancing plans to widen Interstate 495, Interstate 270, and the Baltimore-Washington Parkway, as well as rebuilding the American Legion Bridge. To fund these efforts, the administration has also promoted toll lanes, which critics have derided as Lexus lanes that hurt regular drivers. Do you support these widening and rebuilding projects? If so, how would you pay for them? And if you don't support these projects, what alternatives would you pursue? 90 seconds.
I don't support the pathway that Governor Hogan is taking. I have a different pathway, and it starts with articulating your philosophy. My philosophy is balance. If we're going to get out of gridlock, we need to make sure we have a balanced plan that balances investments in roads with investments in transit, investments in hiker-biker trails. Here's what I would do in the question that you asked. We have to replace the American Legion Bridge, period, hard stop. I would extend the HOV lane to the spur, but I would not widen the Beltway. And we can reduce gridlock by creating reversible lanes. And then what I would do is I would make sure we're expanding 270 north where it goes down to 2 lanes. The current plan does nothing. I would also make sure that we are examining whether we need a P3 project. I'm not against P3 per se, but I'm against bad P3 projects like the Purple Line project. And so in addition, I would be taking a very hard look at whether we can fund this through the remarkable infrastructure dollars we have, because we can pay for almost half the project with treasury bonds that would be at the cheapest rate. So that's what I would do. And I would make sure that we are addressing the issues of the MARC service. We got to improve MARC service. We've got to make sure that we have hiker-biker trails. We've got to do BRT. We've got to have balance. That's what it's about. Governor Hogan's plan is not balanced.
Thank you, Mr. Perez. Now, candidates of either party may seek your minute for rebuttal time. Please put your Zoom hand up. We'll start with Ms. Schultz.
That was fast. I was the last one to raise my hand, but here I go. I just want to say that traffic, especially I live in Frederick County, I can't go north, south, east, or west without running into traffic at any point in time of the day. We have been able to put in record funding for infrastructure and for traffic relief over the course of the last 8 years. I will promise to continue to do traffic relief projects, especially as it goes down to the 270 corridor into 495, because here's why. Those are areas where businesses are looking to be able to relocate, especially in the life science and the biosphere. We want to be able to make sure that there's families that we are relocating here, contrary to popular belief. We're creating thousands of job opportunities across the state, especially in some of these high technical areas. That is an area where we cannot be one of the top traffic congested areas in the country, which we are currently now. We will work with private partnerships. We will make sure that we continue to be able to continue those projects. And if we get the results and we get the backing from local jurisdictions, it will make it really easy in order to get that done. Thank you.
Mr. Ficker.
Thank you. The 270 and the Beltway should have been widened 20 years ago. 270 is pretty much the same in its northern sections as it was when I was in high school. I remember in high school when some people said, we don't need the Beltway, we've got East-West Highway. And a lot of people think like that now. We need to improve our transportation. Look what's happened. Just in the last week, we've had Raytheon, we've had Boeing, and we've had Hyundai, who evidently weren't able to work with Ms. Schultz's Department of Commerce, decide to locate in Northern Virginia. I'm sure one of the main reasons was that we have congestion here in Montgomery County. I wouldn't be surprised if Montgomery County Council's next step is to start giving parking tickets to people driving on I-270. This should have been improved 20 years ago. We need those reversible lanes yesterday, and it'll be the first thing I get to as governor in January.
Thank you. Mr. Barron. You're muted.
Sorry. Okay. So I'm a strong supporter of mass transit, the Purple Line, and an east-west solution in Baltimore, presumably the Red Line. And I also believe we need to move forward with clean cars, electric cars, and others, and have outlined proposals in those areas. But I do support the partial expansion of the Beltway, southern part of I-270, and the northwestern part of the Beltway that's been proposed. Because nobody, I mean, this is a basic issue of economic prosperity and also quality of life. Nobody likes sitting in traffic. One thing that would be very important, and the reason I support it is because it has worked in Virginia. It's provided in the extra lane a congestion-free alternative, not just for people who will pay the additional toll, but also for people who have two people in the car, for cars with two people, HOV. So it's been shown to work. We should do it here.
Thank you. Mr. Gansler.
Sorry. Thank you. Yes, we have an enormous amount of money for the infrastructure bill, and we need to actually focus on mass transit. Clearly, the way in which the plan for the 270 and the bridge, you cannot overstate how inept the procurement process has been under this administration. Under our administration, we're going to revitalize the Red Line. When Governor Hogan canceled that, it was like taking a sledgehammer to the people of Baltimore. We're going to get the Purple Line built. It's been years late and billions of dollars over budget. We're going to put in the Southern Maryland Light Rail from Branch Avenue to Charles County. We're going to put the Metro over the Wilson Bridge like it was built to do, so we can have a connection between Maryland and Virginia. And we're going to get the connection between the Shady Grove Metro and Frederick. In the short term, enhance MARC trains, but in the long term, make sure we have light rail. And we need to make sure that we get our electric vehicle structure in Maryland. The issue on 270 would be much less critical from an environmental standpoint if we actually had the charging stations ready for electric vehicles, because if all the cars that were on 270 were electric, then we would not have that pollution problem. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Siegel.
So Bread and Roses socialism has a totally different approach to the issue of congestion. We'd have no congestion whatsoever if we had a 4-day work week or a 3-day work week. And that's what we're about. We're about putting time back on the agenda and opening up a simple living option so that people in fact can meet their basic needs in 4 days of work or even 3 days of work. And we've got specific policies in the transportation sector and the housing sector for people with low incomes, in fact, to be able to live well at a higher quality of life, actually with only 3 days in the job system. So for instance, in housing, we're in favor of zero interest mortgages that will allow people to have modest houses where they'll be mortgage free after 10 or 15 years because there's no interest payments, and will zero out property taxes for people at the bottom. And similarly in the transportation sector, which takes up a whole day of work, 20% of our household income goes for that. We want to have near free EVs of the sort that General Motors is already producing in China, which costs under $5,000.
Thank you. Mr. Cox.
Thank you. Well, the electric car opportunities are not going to solve our parking lot problems to DC, and neither will putting toll lanes that charge you $60 to go and visit your congressman in the greatest city on earth. We can do better. The Golden State Highway has more than 10 lanes in each direction. And here we are in Maryland sitting on a parking lot for more than 40 years. I think we can change that immediately because of 3 things. Number one, the Transportation Trust Fund has yet to be disclosed to the public. I will put that online and make it audited. Where are the billions of dollars that the federal government and our taxpayer dollars have been provided have gone? Where is that? We have, secondly, we have currently easements available in all of these federal roads to immediately enact not only reversible lanes, which I would be supportive of, but also additional lanes. We can get that done without tolls. And thirdly, we can use private-public partnerships so long as it's not taxing the people through another means. So I would very much support expanding.
Thank you. Mr. Jaffe.
There's so much wasted money that the taxpayers are being forced to deal with. How about carpooling? More carpooling. How about more people working at home? That isn't going to cost the taxpayers 1 cent. That's what Jaffe believes in.
Thank you. Mr. Jane.
Yeah, in January of 2021, I was the first candidate to release a comprehensive infrastructure plan. Within that, I talk about opposing expansion and tolling lane on 270 because it does not address congestion on the non-toll lanes. It doesn't address environmental impacts or the residential impacts. So that's why we need to tackle the issue comprehensively. That means investing in more designated bus lanes, expanding MARC train services to Western Maryland, looking at investing again in the Purple Line and making sure it's more transparent, investing in the Red Line, the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit Project, investing in MTA mobility vehicles, making sure we have universal broadband access, because I do see that as part of infrastructure, making sure we're encouraging ride sharing opportunities, and actually having public transit be free for every resident. And finally, making sure that we're including residents who were impacted by these decisions at the table from day one, which is why our campaign is the first of its kind to be entirely crowdsourced.
Thank you. Mr. Werner.
I would expand 270, 495, and of course we need to replace the bridge, but I'd put HOV lanes in because we can encourage people to get out of individual cars and ride share. That would really help get a lot of cars off. But I would also put a lot of effort and emphasis on mass transit. We can have more light rail. We can improve the metro system in Washington. We can have high-speed rail between Baltimore and Washington. Also have high-speed rail up to 270 corridor. We can also have elevated metro lines in the cities, in Bethesda, in Gaithersburg, and Rockville, because that is where we need to get rid of this congestion. I would have more dedicated bus lanes. If we put more emphasis also in the better mass transit system, we get more people out of cars. We just clear up some of this congestion, and we can make the DC metro area an engine of economic growth by lessening some of that, congestion. That's what I would do.
Thank you. Mr. King.
You know, the only thing worse than traffic is having to pay to sit in that traffic. The toll lane idea is a terrible idea. All the evidence is that the toll lane highway expansion will make traffic worse, not better. We need a very different approach to transportation policy. We certainly should replace the American Legion Bridge, but we also need bus rapid transit. We need reversible lanes. We need to expand the metro. We need to make MARC service more frequent and reliable. We need a broader strategy as a state that centers people, not cars. We need to build the Red Line, finish the Purple Line, build the Southern Maryland Light Rail project. We need to make bus service reliable and frequent throughout the state. We've got to have more protected bike lanes. We've got to have an approach to street design that is transit friendly and that ensures pedestrian safety. And we need to do this because it is better for people's well-being and because it's better for our environment. The climate change threat is an existential threat and requires us to shift how we think about transportation policy.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm opposed to the plan of the 27495 as proposed by the Hogan administration. And it's really because there are three lenses that the Moore-Miller administration will evaluate any transportation project. That is equity, and that is both who is constructing it and who has access to it. It is environmental impact and environmental justice, in particular what it means for low-income communities. And it's also making sure that you have strong community input, both with local elected officials and also local leaders. And when we see what we have with the current plan, there's just been a little collaboration between the local jurisdictions. The current P3 procurement process is deeply flawed. And while I agree, I'm not against P3s in theory, I'm against bad P3s that don't work. And we see how Virginia literally had to change its law to be able to and put together a P3 department that could focus on how you could do it smartly. So for mass trans, we have to look at things like reversible lanes from 270, improvements of other local roadways, invest in bus rapid transit, being able to have mass transit option as part of a larger conversation. So we have to deal with the issue of congestion while also thinking about the future in the way we're
Thank you. Mr. Perez, 30 seconds back to you if you choose.
I think this conversation illustrates vividly the need to have a governor who can actually get things done. My advisor on transportation issues is John Porcari. John's a pro. John's been there, done that. We'll do this with, he knows how to do PLAs. Second point, Delegate Schultz, I'm sorry, Secretary Schultz, excuse me, said, Frederick is in gridlock. Well, the governor's current plan for the area from Clarksburg to Frederick is to do nothing. That's terrible. And finally, let's not spend the next 5 years in court. And if we go forward with the governor's plan, that's exactly what will happen. We're going to fix this and fix it right.
Thank you. This question is for Mr. Jain. Politico reported last month on a draft majority opinion of the Supreme Court that would effectively gut the right to abortion established in Roe v. Wade. Maryland's General Assembly overrode a veto by Governor Hogan to enact legislation expanding the kinds of healthcare professionals that could perform abortion services. However, a proposal to enshrine the right to abortion in the state constitution failed this spring in the Assembly. Would you support such an amendment? Why or why not? Are further steps at the state level warranted to protect the right to an abortion? 90 seconds.
Yes, and people can check my record. I've been campaigning on this issue for 1.5 years. In January of 2021, I was the first candidate in the state of Maryland to actually have a specific reproductive justice platform. Within that, I talk about enshrining abortion access, contraceptive care, and gender affirmation treatment within our state constitution, making sure we teach comprehensive sex ed in all of our public health classes that teach everything from abstinence to contraceptives to gender identity to domestic violence, making sure we have free menstrual products in all of our public restrooms, expanding the availability of medication abortion in all of our pharmacies, where most people in rural communities get access to their health care, removing parental consent to get an abortion, and expanding lactation accommodations for mothers who re-enter the workforce, looking at the entire system comprehensively, and I'm proud that our campaign is leading on this issue.
Thank you. Rebuttals for this question are open to candidates of both parties. You may seek your minute. Please put your Zoom hand up. Mr. Gansler, 1 minute.
Thank you. Yes, I will be a brick wall on this issue. I expect it will come out today. They're overturning Roe v. Wade or upholding the Mississippi law. Either one is an assault on women's reproductive rights and choice and abortion. So clearly, we just saw through Governor Hogan withholding the $3.5 million that while perhaps Maryland is protected against getting rid of the right to choose, it will certainly be chipped away under a Republican governor. I've led during times of crisis. I led during a time when gay people were not allowed to marry each other. So when I was the Attorney General, I wrote an opinion recognizing out-of-state same-sex marriage, where the far-right Republicans literally tried to impeach me for that. I can lead on the social issue like this as well, making sure we're a brick wall against denying women's right to choose. But this is an issue on why it is so important to elect a Democrat this time. We just lost the last election by 12% in 2018 in a Democratic year. This is a Republican year. So we need to make sure that somebody can beat Kelly. She's wonderful, but we need to make sure that somebody can beat her in the general election to protect a woman's right to choose. And so we cannot have somebody who's never run for office. We cannot have someone who's never been vetted. We cannot have someone that has no experience. People will not vote for that person.
Thank you. Mr. Cox.
Thank you. So right now, Maryland is one of the most extreme states paying for using our taxpayer dollars to pay for abortions. And when Mr. Gansler says that he's going to be a brick wall, is he going to be a brick wall for the sex trafficking that's going on right here in this state to cover up sex crimes with the abortions on our taxpayer dollars? That's what's happening. That's why Governor Hogan vetoed that bill. And I will do everything in my power to ensure that every person in Maryland is protected, including those who are trafficked into our state, including the taxpayer who doesn't want to fund these abortions. That's something that's broadly and uniting, broadly supported and uniting across party lines. People of all backgrounds do not want their taxpayers, their tax dollars supporting someone else's choices. And I absolutely support making sure that our Constitution is devoid of such egregious destruction of life, and will do everything in my power to support everyone in Maryland.
Thank you. Mr. Moore.
Thank you. And the governor's refusal to release critical funding that will train and expand access to abortion is remarkably problematic. And this is why governors matter. And this is why I'm running. Because under our administration, we will make sure we're releasing the funding on day one and ensure that Maryland will always be a safe haven for reproductive health care. Because abortion is health care. And, and when we were talking about this last fall and saying that we need to ensure that Maryland is a safe haven, people are saying, well, why are you worried about it? Because our rights are constantly under attack. And so we have to enshrine the right to an abortion in Maryland's Constitution and support that, and also make access to reproductive care more affordable and more accessible in every corner of our state. And that is something that our state needs to defend and needs to take seriously and move on.
Thank you. Mr. Werner.
I'm for the baby's right to life. I'm not against anyone or anything. I'm not, against a woman's right to choose. However, what you're choosing is, unfortunately, a life of a child. When you look at the new ultrasounds, when you look at all the new studies, when children have independent thoughts, independent feelings, independent heartbeat, independent brain waves, they dream, their eyes move. That's a child. At some point, we owe it to that child. When you talk about being against women, there's been 60 million abortions performed in America since Roe v. Wade. At least 30 million of them are little girls that were murdered. They're women that don't exist anymore. So I would say, I believe in a heartbeat bill. It's not making abortion illegal. It's the first trimester you can go get an abortion. After that, that child's an independent life. What I would do is put more money or more funding into helping adoptions, helping women with their health care. I would provide post and prenatal care. And if a woman gets an injury, a birth injury, she would be taken care of. We wouldn't just leave a woman that got pregnant out there on her own. We as the state would be behind her, but I would do the heartbeat bill. Thank you.
Mr. King.
Thanks. My running mate, Michelle Seary, is the executive director of the Women's Law Center of Maryland and was the board president at Planned Parenthood. We are committed to making Maryland the North Star for abortion access. We need a constitutional amendment to protect abortion as healthcare, but we also need to invest in the training of providers for Maryland and for folks who will come from other states to access abortion care here. We need to pass a law similar to Connecticut and California that will protect abortion refugees who come to Maryland for care and protect doctors who provide that abortion care. And we need to ensure that we are providing access throughout the state. 2/3 of our counties, you can't get abortion care now. But I want to make sure that we hold folks accountable for their record. And Kelly Schultz needs to explain what her position is. She supported a bill that would have banned abortion access in Maryland. And I don't believe her when she says she sees it as settled law.
Thank you. Ms. Schultz, you've been mentioned a couple of times. Would you care to rebut?
Well, I guess it's not my point to understand who on the panel believes what I say, but I can give with full integrity what my position is on abortion. And the abortion issue in Maryland was settled 30 years ago in 1992. And it was settled by Marylanders who voted it into our law. And there is not anything that I will do when I am governor in order to be able to change those laws. Regardless, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky because some people think that there's like a big emergency with what happens with Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade decision at the Supreme Court has nothing to do. It cannot change what happens in Maryland law.
Thank you. Mr. Siegel.
Yeah, I want to address this issue as a philosopher. One of the things that troubles me about this, I guess, is the strident way in which people talk about their positions on abortion. Abortion is one of the most perplexing issues in philosophy, and there's no good solution to it. There's only one clear position. It's a position I don't hold, but it's a clear position, which is that the soul comes into existence at the moment of fertilization. If you believe that, then actually any abortion after fertilization is the death of a soul, which means there can be no exceptions, not even for incest or rape. That's one clear position. It's an absolute position that I don't share. But everything else along the spectrum, from fertilization to one day before actual birth, is a question of people taking one or another basically arbitrary position as to where the life of a person begins and has to be protected by law. So what we've got here is actually a moral issue that cannot be resolved. And the question is, how do we deal with this in terms of law? How can we be tolerant of each other?
Thank you. Mr. Perez.
My number one takeaway from this hour we've spent together is the differences between Democrats and Republicans in this upcoming governor's race couldn't be more stark, whether it's guns or whether it's this and so many other issues. The differences are stark. It's really important for the next governor to have experience in a wide range of issues. In 1994, Congress passed the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Bill, the FACE Act, to protect providers of abortion and other services in clinics. I was in the section of the Civil Rights Division that implemented that. I've worked on these issues. When Dr. Slepian was murdered in Buffalo, New York in 1998 or so, I was the second in command in the division. When I was the head of the division and Dr. Tiller was murdered in Kansas, I traveled to Kansas in there. And I'll tell you folks, here's what we need to do. And shout out to Ariana Kelly for her great work on this. We need obviously the amendment, but we need to pass a law that will ensure that the AG represents any provider who gets sued from someone out of state because of these silly bills that other states are passed. We need to set up security and a security arrangement with state and local and federal authorities to protect providers, because this is going to be real.
Mr. Ficker.
Thank you. I'm pro-life, and I'm going to be sending a change of party registration to Mr. Gansler because it sounds like he wants to vote in the Republican primary. Many people have mentioned EVs. We need to double, and I'm the only candidate to say this, double the electrical energy production at Calvert Cliffs nuclear plant, which now provides 41.
That's not the question.
I'm sorry?
We're still talking about abortion.
Yeah, I mentioned abortion, man, but we've also talked a great deal about electronic vehicles, and we need to double nuclear plant energy production from 1 million to 2 million homes so we can energize these cars.
All right, thank you. Mr. Barron.
Yeah, thank you. I strongly agree with my Democratic colleagues on this issue, about enshrining the protections of Roe v. Wade in the Maryland Constitution, and also providing the training to increase the number of medical professionals who can provide abortions in the state. There's also action we can take on a bipartisan basis in this area. My nonprofit worked very closely with the Obama administration, and earlier than that with the Bush administration, to advance evidence-based teen pregnancy prevention programs. We can prevent many unintended pregnancies. This is a $100 million a year program. It tested many different approaches. Some were found to reduce unintended pregnancies and births, particularly teen pregnancies and births, by as much as 1/3. One approach was providing girls who had already had one child, these are teenagers, with counseling and also with access to long-acting reversible contraceptives. There are things we can do that are very effective in preventing unintended pregnancies.
Thank you. Mr. Jaffe.
Thank you. Bad career politicians lead to bad Supreme Court justices that leads to bad decisions. That's the problem. We have these career politicians, we have these judges who are mediocre at best, and that's why we're suffering today.
Thank you. Mr. Jane, you have the option of 30 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, two things. First, just to get it clear, most abortions happen within the first 2 or 3 months. No one is aborting babies, so don't get it twisted. Second, it's funny to hear some of these candidates talk about freedom and liberty and less government, but not when it comes to telling a woman what she can do with her body, or someone from the LGBTQ community who they can love or how they can identify, or when it comes to making sure our children are not being shot to death in our schools. We need leadership. There's a clear difference between Democrats and Republicans. We've seen it now, and that's what I have shown, and that's what I would do as governor.
Thank you. This question is for Mr. Gansler. The Blueprint for Maryland's Future boosts funding for schools, teachers, tutors, and pre-kindergarten, among other programs. Funding for the Blueprint is established through, at best, 2027. As governor, how would you look to pay for the Blueprint in future years? Would options such as tax increases be under consideration, or would you look to other revenue streams? 90
Yeah, and
seconds.
this, thank you. And this is an important question. And as you can tell, I've been getting name checked by a lot of Republicans because they recognize that I'm the only Democrat that can actually win the general election in this campaign, along with Candace Hollingsworth. And there's nothing that matters more other than Roe v. Wade and the right for a woman to choose and crime than education. And so if we don't have a Democrat elected in this fall, then the Blueprint is literally going to go into the garbage. We're not going to raise more taxes. In fact, we should not be paying the gas tax right now. But we are going to make sure the Blueprint is enacted. We have an enormous amount of money through legalization of cannabis, through online sports gambling, some of the things that are going to be coming, and we just have a surplus right now. And part of what is in the Blueprint that's critical is universal pre-K, which we're going to be able to pay for with those means, and universal childcare, because COVID showed that half of the women had to lose or change jobs during COVID because of childcare. But also we're going to have mental health professionals, and we talked about school shootings earlier. Mental health, licensed mental health professionals for every 250 students in our schools. We're going to make sure our schools are safe with SROs and stop the pipeline from schools to the criminal justice system to make sure that our children are safe when we drop them off at school. We're going to pay teachers the amount that they should make. We're going to make sure that we are not having our teachers teach to socialize. It's the standardized test, but actually teach kids to want to learn. We're going to make sure all people have broadband, both in urban communities as well as rural. And we're going to have vocational and literacy training in our schools.
Thank you. I see Ms. Schultz' hand up. I know she has to jump, so you get first rebuttal.
I do. Great. Thank you, Ann. And I'm sorry for having to leave early, but I just want to say, as one of, I think, the only candidates on this panel that has gone through public schools myself, that has sent my children to public schools, that has my grandchildren that will be in public schools, I want to say how important this issue is to me. And it's about being able to make sure that the schools do their jobs, being able to make sure that they teach reading, writing, arithmetic, math, science, and hey, why not skills, right? We need for people to be able to graduate with a high school education and to be able to do something in the communities with which they live. And it's about holding parents accountable for the empowerment that they have and holding schools accountable. And we just heard some very unsettling information that happened within Baltimore City Schools with the IG report. We need to be able to make sure that every student, regardless of the zip code that they live in, gets a world-class education in Maryland. And I will continue to make sure that we have record funding into those schools and to be able to make sure that parents have a choice and we can redo those charter school laws in Maryland so that parents do actually have a real choice. And thank you very much for having me this morning. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Mr. King.
Thanks. Look, I'll be an education governor, not just because I was Secretary of Education for President Obama, not just because I'm a current public school parent with a daughter in Montgomery County Public Schools right now, but because public schools saved my life as a kid. When I was little, both my parents passed away, my mom when I was 8, my dad when I was 12. The thing that saved me was public school. I struggled in high school. I actually got in a lot of trouble, like often happens for kids who've experienced trauma, got kicked out of high school. And it was teachers and a school counselor who put me on the path to becoming a lifelong educator. We have to follow through on the blueprint. To get there, we do need more revenue over the long term. And that means asking multimillionaires and large corporations to pay their fair share. We also have to see the blueprint as the floor, not the ceiling for our investment. We need more investment in mental health services and school counselors, more investment in universal affordable childcare, birth through 5. I'll be the education governor.
Mr. Cox.
Thank you. Well, first of all, the blueprint is not completely funded. As we know, it has a ceiling date. This is going to be a disaster for our economy. And although we hear some of my Democratic colleagues saying they're not going to raise taxes, they have no plan. Cannabis itself will not pay for the billions of dollars that are coming down the pike that are needed to fund this. So I'm going to change that by saying, let's improve and increase school choice as an option. Let's make sure the parents can have the money follow the child with their decision making. And contrary to my opponent on the Republican aisle who says she's going to hold parents accountable, I'm going to hold the government accountable to make sure that parents have the power that they have under the Constitution to direct and control their child's education. This has been done in Florida. It's working. $7,900 per student is following the child. We can do that here. We're a great state. We're a beautiful state. We can do smart things, and that policy will improve and uplift all of our public schools. Also, I think we need to get back to making sure, once again, that the curriculum is devoid of this horrible gender propaganda, and make sure that our kids.
Thank you. Mr. Siegel.
Thank you.
As someone who taught philosophy of education at the University of Pennsylvania, this issue of education is one that's very important to me. And it's on this issue that I differ from every single one of my opponents, both in the Democratic primary and actually on the Republican side as well. Actually, I don't think anybody here, as best I can tell, has seriously read and thought about the blueprint. The blueprint actually is two different documents. One of it is a social justice document that has to do with the flow of funds and resources based on zip code and color and so on. And there, with respect to social justice, flow of funds to schools, it's a gold standard. But the blueprint is premised on the idea that we don't have a world-class system. And it's a comparison. As anytime you actually hear somebody using the term world-class, talking about education as if it's a sports thing or a military thing, you know they haven't thought seriously about schools and about education. The blueprint is premised, for instance, on the differences between Maryland and Shanghai and Singapore. What is the metric that allows you to make those comparisons, right? It's standardized testing.
Thank you.
And the rest of it is
Mr. Barron.
artificial.
My approach on education is very different than all the other candidates. More than a quarter of 8th graders in Maryland cannot read at a basic level. More than a third cannot do basic math. Those numbers are no different than 20 years ago. Even though Maryland saw a major rise in education spending during the 2000s, about a 40% increase in spending per pupil adjusted for inflation. The reason that didn't work is that many government programs, well-meaning education programs, they don't work. We've seen that again and again when the results are actually measured. So when my opponents propose to expand one unproven plan after the next, pouring more money in, that's not going to solve the problem. I do support the blueprint, but as governor, I would implement it very differently, focused on tested and proven solutions, including expanding tutoring in the early grades, as I described earlier, which has been found to move kids up toward grade level. Also expanding career academies, which are small communities and high schools that have been shown to increase long-term earnings by about $3,000 per person.
Thank you.
You need to focus.
Mr. Moore.
Thank you so much. And I like to say that I had two things that saved me. One was that a mother who would not quit, and the other was an education who told me that the world was bigger than what was just directly in front of me. I was very proud to work on the blueprint. I was very proud to testify on behalf of the blueprint and talk about how education afforded opportunities. And in our administration, I'm going to be very proud and make sure that the blueprint is fully funded, and we are not going to retreat from that because our children deserve it. Everything else we are talking about, if we do not have a 21st century education for our children, it will all be for naught. And let's be clear, the blueprint is fully funded through 2026. And we actually have billions of dollars coming to Maryland from everything from the legalization of cannabis to sports betting, to record income tax revenues, to capital financing for 21st century schools. And so it's why I'm very proud of the fact that the teachers, Maryland teachers endorsed our campaign, that MSEA endorsed us with 85% of the vote on first ballot, because we're going to work in partnership to ensure that, yes, while I will fully fund it, we're going to work in partnership to make sure that it is implemented and our children and our educators get the benefit.
Mr. Jaffe.
How about a blueprint that goes like this? Career politicians, first of all, have to tell the truth all the time. How about that? Also, real key is better education. And my tutor mentor program is designed to keep kids in school instead of dropping out, and it won't cost the taxpayers one penny. Check my Facebook, check my website, put up at crookedpolitics.com, and you'll see the answers are right there.
Thank you.
Technical
Mr. Perez.
policy to do what we need.
You know, as the proud parent of three kids who went through the Montgomery County Public Schools, and as someone who firmly believes that education is the great equalizer, I strongly support the blueprint. And I think, you know, the thing that is important for folks who are watching this is there's someone who's not on this Zoom who didn't support the blueprint. His name is Peter Francho. He said we couldn't afford it. Well, we can't afford not to do it, Peter. And you know what? We were #1 in public education 10 years ago, and we've fallen down. I want to get back up there. And you know what? The way to get back up there is to implement the blueprint. The genius of the blueprint is its focus on cradle through career. It's understanding that whether you choose the career and technical education path or you choose higher ed, there are pathways to prosperity for everyone. That's the genius of the blueprint. And I will work together. And one of the best ways to fund the blueprint is through job creation. And as someone who worked as part of President Obama's economic team, I know how to create jobs. And we're going to create clean energy jobs that are $30, $40 an hour union jobs.
Thank you.
Enable us to enhance that tax base.
Mr. Jain.
First, when it comes to funding, we've always had the money, even when we voted for casino slots in 2007, but we don't have a governor who actually invests and cares about public schools. Secondly, public education means everything to me. My grandfather was a high school custodian to provide for his family and achieve his American dream. I attended a Title I elementary school in Wheaton. I also attended a public school in middle school in Montgomery County when I was battling cancer, where the entire ecosystem of that school provided me support. I'm a product of Maryland public schools. So that's why I talk about having universal pre-K, easing student debt for educators, reducing the barriers to becoming an educator and diversifying that pool, making sure we have free public transit, making sure we're prioritizing funding for low-income neighborhoods, making sure we have affordable housing, moving away from standardized testing, requiring financial literacy credits to graduate high school, making sure that we have students feeling safe and supported, making sure that SMOB members actually have full voting rights all over the state, and making sure that we have access to higher education, whether it's a four-year institution, a community college, or trade schools. We have to make sure we have accountability and sustainability in our system.
Mr. Gansler, back to you for 30 seconds, if you so please.
I'm fine. I mean, I just think, look, we just have, the biggest thing is we just have to have someone that can be elected from the Democratic Party. There's too many issues. There's too many crises out there. The education system right now is critical to make sure that that's power and that's empowerment. We need to make sure every child has an opportunity to learn. Right now, what's going on in Baltimore City is horrible. You know, we're here in Bethesda, Chevy Chase. Remember when I was younger, Walt Whitman was the super school, was on the cover of Time magazine. We need to get back to that. We need to have leadership from the top.
Thank you. For our last question, just to make sure that we're going to finish on time, I'm going to make the original answer 1 minute and the rebuttals 30 seconds. This question is for Mr. King. Workers and consumers are hurting right now. Wages are not keeping up with inflation. Inflation is having a real impact. And now we're hearing that 70s style stagflation is a possibility. Maryland's gas tax holiday has expired. As governor, what would you do to provide more support for Marylanders hurt by this economy? 60 seconds.
Yeah. Well, we've got to make sure that we do more to make life affordable. That means we need state leadership on a supply of housing that folks can afford, investing in the Housing Trust Fund, for example. We need to make sure that we invest in public transportation so transportation is more affordable for folks. We need to provide universal affordable childcare, which is a huge challenge in people's everyday lives. We need to treat healthcare as a human right. Healthcare and the cost of prescription drugs is a huge challenge throughout the state. We need a prescription affordability board with real teeth that caps the cost of prescription drugs. We need to address the challenges that people face every day, but we don't need gimmicks. And the gas tax holiday is a gimmick. It's a gimmick that leaves us still vulnerable to control of our economy by despots with oil fields. We need a transportation strategy that moves us away from that reliance. We need to build 10,000 charging stations, move towards electric cars, and dramatically improve public transportation.
Thank you. 30 seconds of rebuttal is open to all candidates. Mr. Jain, I see your hand.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, I would definitely extend the gas tax holiday, but we have to look at the entire system comprehensively to reduce the cost of living and make sure that folks can actually stay in our state, retire in our state, and bring businesses into our state. So that's why at janeforgovernor.com, one part of our program is called the Maryland Now Plan, which is fully paid for, won't cut services, will eliminate the state income tax for 95% of Marylanders, make public transit free, create the nation's first guaranteed jobs program, legalize marijuana while expunging records, and actually get money out of politics. All these issues will bring economic sustainability in the short term as well as the long term.
Thank you. Mr. Jaffe.
The real answer is we have to have ethical politicians. I'm not a politician, I'm a teacher. And I believe the best solution, long-term solution, is better education programs. My tutor mentor program is the answer. I'm asking all of your listeners and viewers, please check my Facebook. You'll see what the tutor mentor program is all about. It's designed to keep kids in school instead of dropping out. That's what we're trying. I want to create a new standard of behavior for politicians. You have to be ethical. You can't take money because money or bribe.
Thank you. Mr. Cox.
On day one, I will suspend the gas tax indefinitely by executive order until the legislature takes action on this issue. The legislature took a pass at the worst time in our history. We're paying now $5 a gallon, $6.50 for diesel in parts of our state, the highest prices in the history of our state for our fuels. Secondly, I will make sure that we expand our opportunities for oil and gas here in our state in a reasonable and economic and responsible manner. We need to reduce our taxation. We are at the bottom of all states for our income tax levels. Florida has no income tax. We're going to make sure that we restore power to the people. Thank you so much.
Mr. Barron.
The biggest economic problem in our state by far is the fact that the bottom 40% of Maryland households have seen stagnant wages since the 1980s, while income inequality has soared. In my first 100 days, to address this, I will launch a statewide partnership with businesses to provide effective job training to every young adult in the state who wants to advance. If it's done right, it's been shown to increase earnings as much as 40%. The key is to focus that training on fast-growing industries. That's number one. And number two, to work hand in hand with employers who provide paid internships to the trainees.
Thank you.
Businesses pick up part of the bill.
Mr. Warner.
First, I would do away with or suspend the gas tax indefinitely. I would do away with Maryland tolls for Marylanders. That would help a lot. I would also start with regulations. When we over-regulate business, we over-regulate the economy. We add to the cost of the economy, add to the cost of living, which is too much. I would look at the way we develop properties and how we have our building standards, how we have so much, not for the safety of the people, but to protect builders. And I will also say, the gas tax, yes, but we need more gas drilling and oil drilling in the United States. And the electric vehicles are wonderful, but you need to have energy from somewhere. I would
Thank
look towards
you.
nuclear. Thank you.
Mr. Moore.
Thank you so much. And we're hearing across the state that this pressure that people are feeling, it is real, and we need to address it immediately. And I'm proud of the fact that I've had a chance to lead in multiple sectors of our economy. And we know that to get people back to work, we've got to do things like addressing childcare and highlighting Maryland's new child tax credit, paid family and medical leave, that we need to focus on things like that we need to focus on training programs, job reskilling programs to get people back to work. And we need to increase the minimum wage and give people a job and an income that actually honors the work that they're doing.
Thank you. Mr. Siegel.
Yeah. I agree with John King that the gas tax holiday is a gimmick. I have a much stronger position on this. Actually, I think we're hearing a lot of hollow rhetoric, really hollow. Remember the term existential crisis? Everybody mouthed it about climate change. Well, the main source of climate change is CO2 emissions. The main culprit is gasoline consumption. The main driver to electric vehicles, in fact, are higher gasoline prices. We need much higher ones. What we actually need to do, though, is to recycle all that revenue to low-income households and to subsidize the transition to electric vehicles.
Mr. Gansler.
When I was president of all the attorneys general of the United States, we had the national mortgage foreclosure crisis, and we were able to fight the big banks and bring almost $2 billion into Maryland to keep people in their homes. I think that's the kind of leadership we need as a pro-business, pro-law enforcement, practical Democrat going forward. we cannot have, we need to suspend the gas tax. In fact, we should not raise any taxes on working families and people. They're getting strapped right now and they need the help. The number one thing that we need to do is make sure we reduce crime, because crime is killing our businesses in Montgomery County and throughout the state.
Thank you. Mr. Ficker.
Thank you. I think that eliminating the automatic increase in the gas tax is a good idea. It'll save the average family about $50 a year. However, cutting the state sales tax will save the average household $780 a year and serve as a lure for all the big companies that are avoiding Maryland. We have an unfunded liability from the blueprint of $34 billion. I am not going to vote to increase property taxes as a result. And I wish that Mr. King had been with me when I tried to open up Maryland at the Open Maryland rally in 2020.
Thank you. Mr. Perez.
People are taking it on the chin, and we have to have a value proposition. Here's my value proposition. The people who can least afford to absorb the inflation that we're enduring right now, that has to be our target market. That's why I do support a short-term gas tax relief. That's why I support making buses free, because if you don't drive a car, gas tax relief is useless. That's why I support expanding the EITC, expanding programs that are going to provide aid to people who need it most. I agree with John and others about our need to get away from fossil fuels, but for someone right now, they need help and they need government to be responsive. And these are the ideas that I would put forth.
Thank you. And Mr. King, 30 seconds back to you if you choose.
Sure. Well, in addition to the economic dignity measures we need to take, raising the minimum wage to $15 throughout the state, indexing it to inflation, providing universal health care and universal affordable childcare, we also need economic development strategies that will grow our economy. We have a huge potential for growth in green economy jobs, renewable energy, huge potential in the tech sector if we train in the workforce that has the right skills, huge potential in life sciences if we build lab space and invest in leveraging our assets like FDA and NIH. In Maryland, success isn't guaranteed, but opportunity must be.
All right, thank you so much. On that note, we're going to wrap it up. Just as a reminder, this session has been recorded and transcripts will be available for all registrants. On behalf of Bethesda Beat and Bethesda Magazine, thank you so much to the candidates for sharing your views. Thank you to attendees for choosing to spend your time with us, learning about the candidates ahead of the primary election, July 19th. Please keep reading and supporting Bethesda Magazine and Bethesda Beat. We appreciate you. Goodbye.